Most people know me as a photographer, but I'm more than a photographer, just like a banker is more than just a banker. What most people don't know is that I carried a camera through combat zones. I jumped out of airplanes, I documented presidents. I even, almost died a few times. Particularly one time when I was in Bosnia, I was involved in a rollover where our vehicle rolled over into a minefield, undesignated, unknown minefield from a previous war. But the purpose of me coming to you on this podcast is to, encourage creatives that it's not about just a dollar. It's not about just making it. It's about the process. It's about purpose. And it's about what shapes you along that journey. I'm a person with experience who had highs, a person who had lows, who continuously experienced those things. And just because you are a creative and just because you want to start a business, those highs and those lows, they don't just stop. And sometimes people just ask me the question pretty often, how did I get to where I'm at and was it hard? Now that I'm older, I'm wiser. I don't even answer that question anymore. I kind of gently guide them and I would say something like, do you mean how long did it take me to get here and how did I get here? Because in my mind, maybe because it's just the Army in me. Maybe it's just because, sometimes, like when you get older, you don't have time for the jive, maybe it's the fact that I don't like that when people ask, is it just hard? Because it says to me that you don't necessarily care about your journey. You don't necessarily care about the process. It's either you're running from work or you're looking to find and do something that's very easy to you. Anything in life worth doing is not going to come to you easy. And you have to plan, you have to prepare. And for those who are creatives and on this journey of ownership, I'm going to share some experiences of my hardships. I'm going to share some of my triumphs. I'm going to share some tips and some tricks so that I can make your life easier. I heard this one phrase that if you've been through hell, then it's your obligation to be a tour guide for those who are coming behind you. And my goal is to invite you on my journey so you can see things through my lens. I'm the type of guy that is a tailwind to people. I'm the type of guy who launches people out into life. I love the basics because once you master the basics, then you can build a tower, for example, as high as you want to. No one can tell you that because you only learn how to build this tower or this home at one level, that it can't be 27 stories. It can't, be 27 levels high. Nobody can stop you. And that's what I learned by being in the Army. I learned that once you know the basics and once you've mastered the basics, it becomes so basic to you that others think you're doing something amazing when you're just like, nah, that's normal. That's easy. So back to the question that some people ask, was it hard getting to where you're at? I'm going to answer it with a better question. How did I get to where I'm at now? Well, before K&L imagery, even before the military, even before the Army, I experienced growing up in the city of Detroit. Shout out, what up, though, to everybody in the D. Detroit was like the epicenter of everything, entertainment, epicenter of vehicles. Growing up, especially on the east side of Detroit, you learn how to maneuver in situations that are, that are just different. So when I went into the military, it was just maneuvering in situations that were different, but now I had more of a sense of a structure. Even before going into the military, I had to learn how to deal with lack. I had to learn how to deal with death. I had to learn how to deal with just relationships in general. That doesn't, that's me. That's everybody else in the whole wide world. But I just feel that me growing up in the city, it made me, as some people say, I'm just cut different. Now, cut different don't mean that I'm just this guy who don't take mess, which I don't take mess. You know what I mean? It's just that it doesn't come with the edge, which people think it does. I would say I got to where I'm at right now through a culmination of life experiences. And I go back to one hard life experience was losing my mom at an early age, growing up in the city. It wasn't a violent death or anything like that, but like so many other people, she actually died of cancer. And dealing with death early, it helped me to actually see life differently. It made me grow up a little bit faster, if you want to say it like that. But it just made me independent. And being that she wasn't there to guide those high school years, it just allowed me to learn my lessons faster. It allowed me to be a bit more mature than what, the typical person is. But it didn't just stop there. It was the next phase of my life, which was me going into the military. So the first place that I stopped was in Camp Casey, Korea. After I did basic training, after I did AIT or tech school, or I did what was considered my job. After I learned that, then I went on to Korea. But while in Korea, I was a young man, young guy. For those who don't know rank, there are 8 to 9 ranks that you can aspire to. 9 is, you can't go any higher than 9, but 8 is generally where the ladder goes to. And the rest at 9 is usually a selective position. But on the third rung of the ladder, a very young guy, I learned to interact with people of higher rank, people who were older than me, people who, saw my job as a combat photographer or just as a photographer as like, a weak job to have, but I would call it, probably the best job to have, because those experiences allowed me to see everyone else's job. It allowed me to see how the Army at large operated. It allowed me to see how the military at large operated. But while I was in Korea, I was in charge of a photo lab, which now that I have my own studio, that kind of just gave me background. It kind of gave me experience on what the regulations, the rules, and the policies that I should have in place now to just make everything easier. And that's just one experience that, allows me as a business owner to, have a leg up, I would say. That's just one thing that got in my experience. So when you have experiences, you have moments. And somebody asked me, what was the scariest moment that I encountered while I was in the military? One of the scariest experiences that I've encountered, I'm going to give you 2. All right, I'm going to give you 2 experiences. The first experience was when I was in Bosnia. I was a young specialist going from one part of the country to the other. It was me and 2 higher ranking guys that were in charge. They were driving. One was the driver. One was what you call a TC, or the person in the passenger seat who makes sure that, that everything else goes well on the journey. TC stands for track commander for those who really want to know, but we weren't driving in a tank, but it's just a word that we use as that, that main passenger who needs to look over things and make sure everything else is going right for the driver. But I was in the back seat, and we were going from this place called Tuzla in Bosnia to Camp Bonstar. So as we were going, we were driving in an old school Cut V. For you guys don't know the old school Cut V, it was just a old giant like suburban Jimmy looking truck, big and bulky. Didn't have much get up or speed as far as acceleration, but it was just a good old military work vehicle. And as we were driving, we were passing up vehicles that were like 18-wheelers. But over in Bosnia, they carry a lot of lumber. And they were carrying this one vehicle that we were behind. It was like an 18-wheel truck or a 18-wheel trailer. And as the vehicles are going slow, 2-lane road, you would pass on the left or, whenever you can. And this one particular time, we were happened to be passing on the left side. And for some reason, the driver, as we were going over the hill, we really couldn't see what was on the other side. And unbeknownst to us, it was another 18-wheel vehicle coming our way. So now I have the 18-wheeler with the lumber, with the trees on the right side. We're on the left side trying to go fast enough to get past him. And we knew we didn't have time to get past. So he tried to step on the brakes and get back behind the vehicle. but we weren't successful doing that. So the only thing we could do is hold on for dear life and just get off the road. So he stepped on the brakes, and next thing you know, only thing I heard was, and then we went off of the road, missed getting hit by an oncoming truck, and we hit the side of the, we went off the road, and the vehicle just started rolling over. Do. It rolled over 2 or 3 times, and now we are right upside down instead of right side up, wheels up in the air, and all the adrenaline, as that was happening, the only thing I can say is God is good, God is good, God is good. And on another note, or probably the prime note, is that's when I learned that God really is good, because we came out of that thing unscathed, besides a little bump and a little bruise. And back to when the vehicle was upside down, the first thing in my mind was I checked myself. I just started, okay, I'm good. And then I looked up front. I really couldn't see anything because we were upside down. So me being a young combat photographer, I grabbed my camera bag and I went out that back window that was open. And then I went to the other side of the vehicle to see if the driver was right. I helped the driver out, and the TC was actually asleep when this was all happening. So he wakes up and we upside down. So I helped get him out. And then from that point, we had to call back to headquarters to get what they call a record, or like a tow truck. And they came and turned the vehicle over, pulled the vehicle out of the area that we were in. And whenever something like that happens, they always send out an unexplored or EOD team. And we happened to find out that that was an old place where there were mines actually where we landed. So, I came out unscathed. And the only thing I can say is that your experiences will shape you. And one thing that I learned as a photographer, and that it's important for anybody to learn in life, is you should always focus on the mission. If you're not broken, even if you're just hurting, you should still focus on the mission. Everyone has a different mission in life. My mission in life is to empower people through my experiences, through my lens, help people get there faster than they would if they didn't have the assistance of me or other people who, share their experiences. Like I say, I consider myself like a tailwind. I launch people out in their life. I consider myself a teacher, not only just a teacher, but a master teacher, because I've done a lot of learning through life. And even to this day, I continue to learn. And seeing that I continue to learn, someone also asked me, what was the best business lesson that I learned outside of the Army? The biggest lesson that I learned outside of the Army that pertains to business is I have to reinvest into myself. Throughout my 25 years in the military pours a lot of money into their capital, which is human capital, which is the most important capital. And for me, the Army's, I ain't gonna say just the Army, but the military at large, because I've trained with Marines, I trained with Coast Guard, I trained with Air Force and Navy. The military has poured hundreds of thousands of dollars of training into me. And then when I transitioned and I got out and I started my own business, I found out that I couldn't be successful unless I invested back into myself. So for me, what that looks like is I had to pay for business courses that I never thought I would have to pay for. Because the Army, they automatically give you structure, they give you processes, they give you basically a budget, which is way outside the individual's budget. They give you all the equipment that you couldn't buy on your own. They give you training, and then they give you scenarios and places where you can practice all of that. All of that went to schmuck when I opened up my own studio, when I became, retired and became a civilian again. All of that was now all up to me. So I decided, just being aware that if I invest into myself, I'm investing into my business. And one of the best things that I've done, like I say, was just paying for courses, paying for mentors. And because the thing is at this point in my life, I want to get to where I'm going a lot faster because I have a family. I have a mission other than making money, that when I invest into myself, I'm investing into my business. When I invest into my business, and when I invest into my business, it's going to help me with my overall investment into myself as a person. And that is probably the number one thing that I would say is important to learn, or the biggest business lesson that I've learned being outside the Army. Now, being outside the Army, there are hard times. But I would say one of my most proud times, someone asked me this also, like, what was your proudest moment being a business owner? For me, it was being able to give my EIN instead of my social security number. That was probably like the coolest thing in the world, because it lets me know that I have something that's legit. I have something that is not attached to my name, directly attached to my name. It lets me know that I'm running an entity, just like the military is an entity, just like Walmart is an entity. I have my own entity, and that was just a very, very, very proud moment. Is when I, another one was when I actually wrote a check that was for over $10,000. That was a really cool one. I was like, hey, I've never done that while I was in the military, as far as having to pay for things, because I didn't have to. But when you own your own business and you're able to give, and then your business gives back to you, you're more excited to give back into your business, because overall it helps you out with your purpose. We all have different purposes in life. I know my purpose is to launch people out into their destiny. The way that I do that is I teach, I give insight. I talk about my experiences. I give people roadmaps, and a roadmap will help people to know where they're going. And not only a roadmap, I'm a guide. So I knew I had amazing guides, and I had some crappy guides or leaders. So I've always prided myself. I kind of beat my chest on being proud to be one of those leaders that when I went from one station or one duty station to another, or went from one assignment to another, I found out people tell the truth about you. They give you unsolicited feedback, and they tell you what you really meant to them. And I've learned that the lessons of not being such a good leader that other people have displayed to me, I said, I don't want to be that in life. And then when I came to leave to go to a new assignment, we have what we call hail and farewells. But this right here was a farewell, and it means that you're leaving, going to another destination. This is funny. It's almost like when you're in high school. I know a lot of people can relate to this. Like when you're in high school, you don't find out the girl that was checking you out until it's time to go. I've experienced that. It was so funny. They're writing your book. I don't know. People don't do that no more. Like they don't write in your book, or write on the back of photos anymore. But I experienced that in high school. Was like this one girl that I really liked. I never knew she was checking me out, because guess what? It was time to move on to another phase of life or to another destination. And then that's when it comes out. Oh, I always this about you. I always that about you. And I was like, yo, like, why didn't you let me know? Or maybe she was throwing signs and I ain't pick it up. But going back to the military experience and just leadership, when you leave, your subordinates, they'll either tell you informally, because of you, my family is better. Because of you, I learned this. Because of you, I want to stay in the Army. Because of you. And it's just like, wow, like you get a lot of praise just for, just being a good person, walking in your purpose, and pouring into people. Pouring into people can happen at every level. As a matter of fact, I was a young sergeant. I was like the 5th rung on the ladder, to keep the same illustration going on. And I was selected to take myself and a younger soldier to the Philippines. Now, mind you, I'm like maybe between 21 and 23 years old. And I think I'm about, let me see. Actually, I'm 20 years old, 20 or 21 years old. And I have the opportunity to take military equipment, a soldier, and myself from the United States to the Philippines to participate in the exercise at the time called Balikatan. And that was just a proud moment for me, not as a business owner, but a proud moment as just a leader, that the people who are above you that poured into you see enough of themselves or the responsibilities or the principles that you've learned that they are willing now to say, you know what, this person is ready to lead. And not only lead themselves, because initially when you're young, you have to learn how to lead yourselves. So for those young creatives, who want the big gig, go ahead and learn how to lead yourself on the small gigs before you just, go ahead and bite into something that you can't handle. So that right there was one of my most proud moments while I was in the military, but it also corresponds to being a leader and owning my own business. Because as a business owner, there are levels that you go to. And now that I'm a owner, I understand that why those people who were above me, the processes that they put in place, me, that I reinforced the processes and principles. And you got to have a culture in your business. Not only did I learn those things, but I had to also teach those things. Believe it or not, I was a drill sergeant. So I had a bunch of yahoos up under me. My first cycle as a drill sergeant in basic training, I had 60 young soldiers under my tutelage. And it was me and two other drill sergeants that, were responsible for training, that we were responsible for teaching these young people how to become the next generation of people who are going to defend the United States. But they had to go through the basics. And someone asked me the question, what did I learn from teaching? And I'm not going to even go on teaching as a drill sergeant right now, or even teaching as a photography instructor, because I was a photography instructor also. So what I learned about teaching in general is that before you can teach something, you have to really, really learn it. And you have to break it down for people. So you really don't learn, at least me, I'll say it like this, you really don't learn until you're able to teach it to someone else. And I always go back to this method. It's called the KISS method. I'll give you the original wording or the original acronym, which is keep it stupid simple. A teacher or an instructor or a facilitator is, you can't teach others until you really mastered it yourself. And in order to be a teacher, you have to learn more than one way to do it. And the most beautiful part about that is there's a discovery that happens. It's a self-discovery. You find out that you probably weren't as smart as you thought you were. You didn't have it down as much as you thought you had it down. But through that, it's a discovery. It's a process. And as a young creative or anybody doing anything in life, I want to encourage you to don't try to circumvent the process, because the process is who you are. And being who you are makes you, how can I say, not only marketable, but it makes you usable to everybody who's around you. It makes you usable and beneficial as a parent. You're an asset and not a liability, because you're not just talking what you think. You're talking what you know. You're talking from experience. And there's this cycle that I want to talk about, which is, the discovery process and the implementation process. The faster you test and go through the discovery process, the faster you can implement what fixes the next phase in any process. So that's how you go from one place to another, and you go there really, really fast by going through the discovery process. Back in the day, I think they called it tinkering. People used to like it to take apart, cars, take apart door handles, take apart radios, and put it back together. When you go through that discovery process, everything you talk about is just so much easier, and you can talk about it in a multiple faceted ways. What I also learned about teaching is that you have to be humble, and the more humble you are, the higher you go. But if you're not a humble person, you're going to end up eating that doggone humble pie. And I know that nobody like eating no humble pie, because getting out there and talking when you don't know, students in this phase of my life, I'll say students and clients, they will let you know that you don't know what the heck you talking about. So you have to be humble, and you have to always be learning. So I learned, even as a teacher, you have to continue to learn. You have to continue to what I would say is lifelong learning. My dad used to say that, if you ain't learning nothing, or you don't want nothing to learn, that, it's time for you to go. It's time for you to go on to heaven, because God can't do nothing with you. He can't use you. Ain't no more he can pour into you. So you're pretty much useless at this point. So just like learning doesn't just happen. Somebody asked me the question, what was the thing that I learned probably the hard way as being a business owner and being a professional outside the military? Probably the hardest thing that I learned was structure just doesn't happen on its own. Structure is one of those things that you have to have. You have to sit down and you have to diagram. You have to sit down with your own thoughts. You have to sit down and get beyond the excitement of something, because the excitement makes you want to just decorate. It doesn't make you want to necessarily build. It's just like I use the example when, my wife, she sees something new or see a certain brand new style that comes out. She immediately wants to go to the store, get all the color patterns, and just start decorating. I remember one time I had to build a faux wall or entertainment wall, where we have a fireplace and a TV. And she was so excited about it. The only thing she did was she said, I want it to look like this. And then she started buying all the accessories that goes with this, that goes with that. And I was like, hold up, slow down, wait a minute. Because I have to build this to a certain specs in order for this wall to actually fit in the room. And not only fit in the room, I have to make sure that it's safe. And I need to make sure that the structure is right, because if the structure is bad, then everything else will crumble. It's not about the prettiness or how beautiful something is. It's not all about this is a beautiful photo, but it's about the structure in which you go about things, because whatever you do, even as a creative, you want it to last. So as you go into business, you want to have a business structure. But like most people, they learn the hard way instead of being smart and learning the smart way of find someone who has a template, go get that template from that person, whether you have to build a relationship with them or whether you have to buy the template. And then you build your structure based on what you know versus what you don't know. And then you can do all the pretty stuff, such as SEO, such as client management, such as processes. So the structure is the most important thing, because without a structure, you can't have a process. Without the process, you won't be able to go forward how you will hope to go forward. And then you'll be in this repetitive cycle of learning the hard way, hitting your head hard instead of moving forward and moving fast in life. Well, that's enough for now, because I have that gift, the gift to teach and give to others, but I also got the gift to gab. So I want to close this out, and I will see you on the next one.